in New York and exactly what was going on there. And so really, so what I'm getting at here is what we understand now about the kind of regime change operations which were being put in place back there immediately after 9/11 really feeds into a sort of renewed discussion and analysis going on at the moment as to exactly what was going on with 9/11 and who were the sponsors and who was involved in it. So all very interesting. Understanding Syria, to get to the final part of the presentation. What we certainly know about Syria is that we've had a multi-layered propaganda campaign involving think tanks, civil society organizations, as well as formal propaganda activities. And at the moment, it looks like it's an extremely extensive propaganda operation which is underpinning Syria. If the propaganda operation of the war on terror has been massive, Syria has certainly been huge and it's clearly been connected to what we see in the immediate aftermath of 9/11. The narrative, as we know, which has been emphasized, has been that we have a brutal, repressive Assad using chemical weapons versus a democratic revolution. And what's been obscured, and what we know now at least, that has been obscured by that narrative, has been the extensive Western and Gulf state covert operations, for example, Operation Timber Sycamore, which has included supporting extremist militant groups within Syria. This conflict has not been a conflict which the West has been standing aside from. It's a conflict which the West has been very much involved in, and again, taking the link back to what we see after 9/11, clearly we see an evolution of policy, more or less moving in the same direction, ultimately leading to what we see in Syria and attempts to try to overthrow the Syrian government. This is, to quote somebody else, and you're not just hearing from me, this is Professor Sachs, American professor, talking about 4 weeks ago, and he was very clear in an MSNBC interview just before the airstrikes following the Duma event in Ghouta, and he was very clear. He said that the 500,000 dead in Syria are a consequence of us, I think he says, very directly. He mentions Operation Timber Sycamore. He explains that this supporting of extremist groups within Syria in order to try to overthrow the regime, he says very clearly it's covert, it's illegal, it was not authorized by Congress, and it's been the primary problem fueling the conflict and meaning that so many people have actually died in the conflict. And so you're getting sort of very high profile support for a reinterpretation of what we see in Syria, and in the following presentations we'll see this very clearly in terms of more detail. To start, propaganda, going back to the start of the presentation, is indeed it's ubiquitous to modern democracies. We do live in a world where this is extensively employed, even though governments don't admit to it, and even though mainstream media are very reluctant to admit to being sort of part of a propaganda machine. The war on terror itself needs to start to be understood itself as a propaganda construct designed to mobilize Western populations and underpinning, or that has ultimately underpinned a series of highly destructive conflicts throughout the Middle East and in the international system. InfoWatch, in terms of the perceptions of Syria and its failure to understand our covert involvement in Syria, indicates quite how successful the propaganda operations have been for a long time in relation to Syria. And all of this really just leads us to, and I'll finish on this, we'll pass on to the presentation, we'll start getting into some of these details. We now have very serious questions confronting us as publics, our politicians, our media, with respect to the morality and legality of not just actions in Syria, but actions over the last 17 years. Regime change operations we've been employing, the extremely dubious legality, if not obvious illegality of what's been going on, and what that means essentially for the state of our democracy and what it means for the state of our media and our ability to actually understand what's going on in the world. But these are the questions which now very much confront us as a society and which we need to start engaging with and dealing with in a very open way. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Piers, for that excellent and in-depth analysis. That was brilliant. Okay, we'll move to our next speaker, and that is Robert Stewart. Robert is an investigative researcher whose extensive investigations into BBC Panoram's programme Saving Syria's Children have been described by eminent journalist Jonathan Cook as forensic. Robert has been dogged and tenacious in his efforts to research this particular programme and all its irregularities. He's presented now, this will be his fourth presentation.